Hi friends, today we are going to talk about the nature of language. Language is a set of human habits, the purpose of which is to give expression to thoughts and feelings. This quotation is said by D.T.Ed. person. What is the concept of nature of language? Language is the divine gift of God only to the man. A language helps a person in the development of his personality. What distinguishes a man from an animal is the language and provides him the highest honor among all other forms of life. In fact, it is the language which brings the people of different culture and communities closer. Language is a means of communicating thoughts and feelings to others. The purpose of language teaching is to facilitate language learning. Teacher's task is to teach and learner's task is to learn. It is essential for a teacher to understand the concept of language, teaching and learning because its nature is quite different. Teaching is an art and learning is science. Now let us discuss in detail meaning of language. Language is an essential part of human life. The word language seems to have been derived from the Latin word lingua, which means tongue. It is a specific form of speech that evolved over a period of time. It is a kind of conventional arrangement, a common usage, and intelligible patterns of words and idioms which help the group of communicate effectively. Since language has relevance only in a social setting, it is called a social phenomenon. Language undergoes a continuous change. Now we are going to see some definitions of language. According to B.Ed. Strang, language is an articulated system of signs, primarily in the medium of speech. Then John Dewey says, language exists only when it is listened as well as spoken. The hearer is an indispensable partner. Then third definition is Jesperson defines language as a set of human habits, the purpose of which is to give expression to thought and feelings. Then Block and Traeger write, a language is a system of arbitrary vocal symbols by means of which a social group operates. Then H.A. Clason says, language is one of the most important characteristic forms of human behavior. Then according to Sweet, language reveals ideas and feelings through meaningful sound of words. Then Oxford English Dictionary defines language as words and the methods of combining them for the expression of thought. According to Ben Jonson, language most shows a man speak that I may see thee. Then R.A. Hall, 1964, defined language as it is the instruction whereby human beings communicate and interact with each other by means of habitually used oral, auditory, arbitrary symbol. The next definition of language is said by E. Sapio opines that language is a purely human and non-instinctive method of communicating ideas, emotions, and desires by means of voluntarily produced symbols. Now, broadly, we can say that speaking language includes all those verbal and non-verbal actions of human beings that are related to the communication of ideas. It is a complex system of communication with various levels of complexities involving intricate selection and ordering of meaningful sounds and larger units and arrangements. Language emerges from meaningful sounds. The moment we say something meaningful, we are saying it in some language. In this sense, body posture, gestures, written and printed symbols, etc., then come within the definition of language. Now, according to all these definitions, it becomes clear that language is used to give expression to thoughts and feelings of a social group. Then, what is the nature of language that we are going to talk about? The language is learned. How it is learned? Now, see, a learning of language is not instinctive or an automatic process. It requires efforts. If we are not going to take any kind of effort, so we could not learn. So we must have to do some efforts for learning anything or acquiring any skill. It is not the type of behavior like walking, sitting, etc., then which are quite natural. But language learning requires specific efforts. The child has to learn it over a long period of time. He is exposed to sound around him. He begins learning of language by making various isolated sounds like mama, papa, and later on he develops his babbling sounds into speech sounds. This he does by imitation. Gradually, the child learns the words and grammatical constructions of his native language. Thus, language is acquired by conscious efforts. Then, second one is language is a system. Language is a complex whole like the human body. The system of the body functions through different organs such as the heart, lungs, brain, ears, and eyes. These various organs are interconnected and work in coordination. Similarly, the system of a language functions through sounds, words, and structures. In the functioning of human body, different organs are of equal importance. Similar is the function of various aspects of a language. It is difficult to say speaking is important or writing in a language. Then third one, nature of language is a system of systems. Language is undoubtedly a system, and that system involves sounds means phonology, words means morphology, and structures means syntax. These different elements functions in coordination. Let us be more clear that as the human body has a blood circulation system, a nervous system, and a bone structure system, if any of these organs fails to work, the whole body will stop functioning properly. In the same way, language has three main elements: sounds, vocabulary, and structure. If any of these three elements and systems fail to operate individually, the language will not be correct. Then the fourth one is language is a system of symbols. Language is a system of symbols, and every word, phrase, or sentence represents some object or idea. Language functions effectively when the symbols used are known to both the speaker and the listener, the writer and the reader. The various symbols of a language are the words. Symbols have sounds and meanings. The language functions through the symbols if meanings are attached to them. For example, the word pen has three sounds: P-E-N. It is a symbol of English language because the person who used or uses it has given it a meaning. That's why we are using the spelling of pen. But if we take up the same three sounds like N, P, E, that do form NPE, But that is not a symbol of English language, as no meaning has been attached to that by the person using the language. Means it will become meaningless. So it should be in the proper order, then only it can be meaningful. Then fifth one is the symbols of language are vocal. The word language is derived from the Latin word lingua, which is produced with the tongue. And therefore, in the beginning, language is a speech. There are many languages which are only in spoken form. For example, different symbols used in a language are vocal. There are other kinds of symbols that cannot be called vocal symbols. For example, gestures, flags, green and red light, etc. are visual symbols, and beating of a drum, ringing a bell, etc. are auditory symbols. They do not form language. In language, the sounds are produced through vocal organs. Language and its symbols are primarily meant for speaking, writing, and reading are rather the secondary aspects of a language. Thus, the primary form of language is speech. Without the spoken form, the language would have, in fact, died, even though vast amount of literature may remain written in the language. But all the sounds produced by the human vocal organs would have included in linguistic symbols. For example, sneeze, cough, etc. have no symbolic value. They may have some meaning in a particular social group only. Then the sixth one is the symbols of language are arbitrary. By arbitrary symbols, we mean that there is no visual relationship between the word and the object it stands for. Let us take the example of word fan. We have not named it is so on the basis of some logic or scientific principles. In English, we say fan. In Hindi, we say pankha. Actually, we call a fan because when the language was originated, people agreed to use it in that sense. Then seventh one is language is unique. Why it is called as a language is unique? Each language is unique because it has its own style of functioning. The sounds, vocabulary and structures of every language have their own speciality. There are geographical, cultural diversities, and that is the main reason why one language differs from the other. Then eighth one is a language is for communication. Ben Jonson says, speech is the instrument of society. Only through language we can pass on our ideas to others. Without language we shall not be able to express ourselves. That way, whatever is in our minds will remain with us. If we use the language correctly, only then will our ideas be communicated to others accurately. So, it becomes essential on the part of a person that he should have a right type of pronunciation. The ninth one point is language is related to culture. Now, how it is related to culture? Each language is the product of society. We cannot think of any language existing in a vacuum. Human language is transmitted from one individual to another not by physical inheritance but by learning. It has meaning only in relation to a particular culture and society. This is so because cultures are different. Language changes its shape and model according to the needs of the people in a particular society. In this regard, J.C. Fry says, the only basis for correctness in a language is the usage of its native speakers. Language develops in a cultural context and therefore meets the needs of the society means culture in which it develops. It may be useful to point out that standard British English means happy and standard American English differ both in spellings and pronunciation, yet each one is correct in its own culture but not in the other. Now, tenth point is language is ever changing. Change is the law of nature, all of us know. No language on this earth is static. Every language is undergoing a change with the passage of time. Languages change in all their aspects, in their pronunciation, word forms, syntax, and word meanings. These changes are mostly very gradual in their operation, becoming noticeable only communicatively over the course of several generations. But in some areas of vocabulary, particular words closely related to rapid cultural change are subject to equally rapid and therefore noticeable changes within a generation or within a decade. In the 20th century, the change in the vocabulary of science and technology is an outstanding example of change in the language. Even the meanings of the words undergo a change with the passage of time. For example, earlier the word fakir usually meant a saint, but in present scenario it is used for shabby dressed. Thus we can say that language is never static. It undergoes changes with the passage of time.